Thanks for downloading this podcast from Radio Kerry. For more, go to radiokerry.ie/podcasts or search iTunes using the keyword Radio Kerry.
We're going to start this morning with the story you would have heard in our news, and that's that parents of long-term residents at St Mary's of the Angels facility in Beaufort are calling for effectively what amounts to plans for its closure to be reversed. A newly formed parents group met last Thursday out of concern from a meeting that they had with the management at the St John of God's Run facility, which outlined a plan to move the 76 long-stay residents at St Mary's of the Angels out into accommodation in the community. Now, with me in studio here is Jack Fitzpatrick, whose son Bernard is at St Mary's of the Angels. We also have Joyce Bambury, whose brother is at the facility, and Dolly Lawlor is on the line as well, whose son Daniel has been there for 35 years. Jack, I'll start with you. Tell me first of all about Bernard and how he came to be in St Mary's of the Angels.
Good morning, Jerry. Well, I suppose Bernard was born the August weekend in 1976. He was born in St Catherine's Hospital here at the time, and what happened to him was just pure negligence. What happened was the doctor on the night didn't turn up, and the nurse, who happened to be on duty, had to deliver him. And this has resulted in Bernard being severely brain damaged. He looks perfect, but he's severely brain damaged. He's about a year old.
So
mentally.
Is he someone who would need intensive support and has needed that for all of his life?
Absolutely. He went into Beaufort and St Mary's Angels when he was 5 years old, and I'll just briefly give you his routine, which gives an idea of the beautiful place that Beaufort is. Bernard goes home every second weekend to his mother's home. She takes him home for summer, for Christmas, and all the usual birthdays and all that. When he's in St Mary's, he gets up in the morning, he's dressed, he's changed, he's in nappies, he's washed, given his breakfast, and he goes into his wheelchair, and he can steer that wheelchair like a rally driver right around the corridors in St Fidelis's, in and out of one room perfectly. He totally enjoys it. For myself, I can call in there randomly anytime, put on his coat and cap, and take him off on the beautiful walks around Beaufort. It just works perfect. Actually, I always ring before I go in, and the reason why I do that is not because I want to warn him that I'm coming or anything else, but because I could wind up going in and he wouldn't be there at all.
Yes.
He could be over in Bunkers in Killarney. He could be inside in Killarney in the ice cream shop. He could actually be anywhere. And he has 4 sisters, and they always say that Bernard has a better lifestyle than they have. And they say if that is an institution that he's in, bring it on. That's what they say. As far as we're concerned, St Mary of the Angels is a beautiful community in itself, inside an even larger community. Bernard is with people that he has everything in common with. Now, I'd ask people like listening in this morning, if you're going up to the All-Ireland or going to any football match, do you go with people that you have something in common with, or do you go with people that you have absolutely nothing in common with? They are proposing to move. Now, I would just also add there that Bernard and all the others in there are severely mentally and physically disabled. They need all the services. They need every service. They need physiotherapy. They need everything.
Occupational therapy.
They're all there. Now, they're talking about scattering them from one end of the county to the other.
Okay.
There isn't even a doctor in a lot of villages that are in Kerry.
Sure. Okay. Tell me how this plan came to light from your point of view. I've seen a document, a report outlining the plan from St John of God's and the HSE, Kerry Services Development Committee report. This was formulated, I think, in late 2014 and finalised in 2015.
Yes. And
it was a response to a number of ongoing issues in terms of HICWA inspections of the facilities at St Mary's of the Angels, and some of the challenges from more so the physical infrastructure, not the care that was being delivered, but the actual physical buildings and infrastructure that new HICWA standards impose on all of these sort of facilities. So this is where it came from. When did you first learn of this move in a kind of any sort of clear way of that this was probably going to be what was going to happen?
Yeah. There has been a rumour going around for a long time. There's actually been 2 rumours going around for a long time, really since St John got to go from the nuns. And these 2 rumours have been that St Mary of the Angels was going to close and that there was going to be a drug rehab centre opened up inside there. We don't know how true the second part of it is. We know the first one is true because now we can see it is. On the 26th of August this year, we, the parents, got a letter out telling us that there was going to be a family forum meeting. Basically, it kind of happens from time to time. It's just where we go in and we meet the staff and they tell us how things are going. And
they bring the families in.
Yes.
They talk to them about here's how things are going
yes,
here's how
just a nice friendly meeting. And at the end of that meeting, I just said...
That was on the 18th of September.
Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. That meeting was called for the 18th, which, by the way, was the 6 o'clock the evening, the All Ireland. Not an ideal time, but anyway, It was grand. We got in there. At the end of that meeting, I raised a question. I just asked, what are the long-term plans for St. Mary of the Angels? And then the bomb was dropped. The question wasn't expected. We could see that from the 4 people that were up on top. They said that it was in process to move everybody out into the community. Now, everybody inside there was terribly upset to hear this coming out like that. But I wouldn't get hung up on how we were told. What is happening is what's really bothering us, because we don't agree with it.
What's your main objection to what's being proposed? Because this, and we'll get to the statement from St. John of God's in a moment, but this is across a number of services that have been provided historically in this country. This is seen as best international practice, and it's a HSE policy as of 2011 to move people from congregated settings, it's called decongregation in HSE speak, to integrate them amongst the community. It's seen as the best way of doing things. What's your objection to that? My
objection, Johnny, is that we see where they are at the moment as a community in itself inside a larger community. They're not in a congregated setting, as far as we're concerned. You
don't see it as an institution in the traditional sense of the word?
There is no big walls around St. Mary of the Angels in Beaufort. There is no big iron gate. It is completely open to come and go as you please. I could go over there when I leave here now today, and I could take Bernard, put him into the car, and I can go anywhere with him. I can go home, I can take him to the tree. It's completely free and easy. There's no such thing as that being an institution or a congregated setting. It is a fabulous place, and it should be built on. And what I would say is bring more of the community in there. Like, there are new houses going up in Beaufort every day of the week. People are crying out for land there because they're moving, as you know, they're moving out from Killarney because it's such a fabulous place.
It's seen massive population increase.
There's a farm of land there by the nuns. Why don't they start moving the community in rather than pushing them out?
Okay.
That's what I want to see happening there.
Okay, we also have Joyce Bambury on the line. Joyce, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jerry.
Your brother has been at the facility for quite some time?
It's since 1992.
Okay. Are you along the same lines? What's your objection to, I suppose, what you've learned? Is it the way you've learned it as well as what's going to happen?
Well, I come at it from both aspects because I'm also a teacher on the grounds. I teach in St. Francis Special School.
Okay.
And I can see how big a community is. I can see that it's not an institution. Our children mingle with the residents every day. I meet my own brother when I go out on walks. I just see how safe it is, and I worry as well for the school. Now, I do know that they had planned to close the school, but that has been put on hold because...
Well, this is a line in the report that we'll get to, that the Board of Management of the school was to develop plans for moving off campus. But just keeping it on St. Mary's of the Angels at the moment... you would be feeling in the same way as Jack about keeping it as it is rather than moving it out. Have you got a concern? Is it a concern about staffing levels, Joyce, in these bungalows and apartments that they're being proposed to move to, or is that another part of it?
I do have a concern about staffing because I know how funding is, and I know how even our classrooms run. If someone goes to the toilet, or if someone needs to take a break, or if someone calls in sick, automatically your staffing is down and you can do less. And I worry that when they're in an isolated house, I know they're staying there in the middle of a town in the community, but that makes safety an even bigger concern. And a lot of the residents now that are able to go out in their go-karts or out in their bicycles or out for a walk independently won't be able to do that in the middle of a town.
Because they won't be on a campus as they are now.
That's it. We're very safe. Like, even from the school point of view, if a child does go out the gate, they're still very safe. You know, we are in a perfect location. And another concern I had was that one's opinion was asked about this. I've read that 2011 document from the HSE, and a huge part of it was that they said they're supposed to ask the residents where they want to live and with whom.
Yeah.
The numbers and everything. And no one has asked my brother, and I believe no one has really asked any of the residents that have been moved where they want to live and with whom they want to live.
Okay.
And my brother would definitely give you the answer.
Yeah. Joyce, stay with me. We're going to talk a bit more with Dolly and with Jack as well. If you've a view on this, get in touch with us and we'll get to the response, a statement given to us by St John of God Services in Kerry. Yes, you're listening to Kerry Today. We're speaking with some parents of St Mary of children and relatives at St Mary's of the Angels in Beaufort about their concern over a plan to move the long stay residents from St Mary's of the Angels out into the community as per HSE policy. We've got Jack Fitzpatrick in studio with us here, Joyce Bambury on the line, and Dolly Lawlor on the line as well. Dolly, if I can talk to you for a moment, your son Daniel and has been there for 35 years, I understand.
35 years, yeah.
And what are his needs?
He needs 24-hour care. He's on nappies. He has seizures. He can't stand. He can feed himself, and he can understand a little bit what you're saying and talk, but he needs 24-hour care. And my concern is, you see, as I said, he's there 35 years, and we've always been used to the best of care from the staff on the ground. They are fantastic people, and I would be very, very, very concerned that that care would not be there if he was moved. I am a 1,000,000% against him going out in the community, because no matter where he'd go, he would not get the care that he gets in St Mary of the Angels, in Mary Gretty's unit.
And would you take any guarantees from anyone, be it the HSEs, or that the staffing levels will be up to standard?
Not from the minister, not from the Taoiseach, not from the president. I wouldn't take any guarantees from anybody. And you see, all these people, they have a duty of care to our loved ones. And to put people that are that long in St Mary the Angels out in the community, it would be totally
Is
wrong.
the change the biggest aspect of it? The change, the effect the change would have on them?
The change is the biggest aspect of it that it would have on them. They're in their own community. The people that they live with, the rest of the service users, they're like their brothers and sisters. They're used to being with them all the time. And it would be a huge, huge concern for me if Danny was put out in the community, because I don't trust anybody. And as I said, we're used to the best of care from the staff on the ground.
Okay.
Now, I know that we say John of Gods have their this and that, whatever they need to do, but that's not my concern. My concern is my son. And I would challenge anybody to come and tell me that I'm not doing right by my son. There is no one, not even the minister, can tell me that it's right to put my son out in the community when he's used to being over there all those years.
Okay. Dolly, thanks for talking to us this morning, giving us your view. The response from the St John of Gods, and Jack, I'll talk to you about this in a moment. Just outline, first of all, the plan as outlined in the Kerry Development Services Committee report. They outline the number of bungalows that will be used in the community: Tralee, Castleisland, Killarney, Kenmare, Knockline, Beaufort itself, Listowel, Cahersaveen, Killorglin, essentially all over the county, these units. And they outline the number of clients, a number of service users will be in each department. The most is 4 in any one place. And then the number of caretakers or caregivers that would be there. High support people would get 4+ staff, 2+ staff, 3+ staff, just in terms of this has all been outlined as part of this fairly detailed plan for us. The statement from St John of Gods says the following in response to your complaints. The Health Service Executive rolled out a new national policy for congregated settings like St Mary's of the Angels in 2011. It calls for the people living in congregated settings to move into the community. This applies to all congregated residential centres for people with the intellectual disability across the country. St John of God's Kerry Services is obliged to comply with this policy. The policy outlines strong evidence of the benefits for people living in inclusion in the community. We currently support 14 homes based in the community across Kerry, and the residents in these homes benefit from the improved access to local facilities and inclusion in the community. Feedback in these homes has been largely positive from the residents, their families and from HIQA, the Health Information Quality Authority. We acknowledge that a number of families are fearful of community living, and we will be working closely with the families as we progress with the policy. We understand that moving home is a stressful undertaking for the residents and for their families, especially for those who have been living in St Mary of the Angels in Beaufort for many years. St John of God Kerry Services is committed to providing the best possible services to those we support. So that's what they're saying. Do you accept any of that, Jack?
That is, to me, is an absolute load of rubbish. That's what that is. First of all, they talk about the parents being afraid of community living. The parents are afraid of community isolation. Isolation is what they're afraid of. These people that are living as St Angels in Beaufort, they need a very, very high level of care, and they need all the services. Now, I live in Carsabeen. I know what services are available in Carsabeen. And you know the size of Kerry. For God's sake, do you mean to tell me we could have those services if we scattered our people from one end of this big county to the other? It is the most ridiculous thing you ever had of in your life.
But the HSE national policy would say, and maybe it's being applied for other types of institutions, that this does work. They're saying it's best practice internationally, when the supports are provided one-on-one in houses, that is the way to go. It's the best way to go. And the other point on that, Jack, and this is what the HSE, and we are waiting, by the way, for the HSE to come back to us and St John of God's to a list of questions we've put to them in the last 24 hours, much more detailed questions than have been answered in this statement. But that they would say, look, there's been HIQA inspections, 2 of them in the last year, and they have found that facilities at the centre aren't up to the standard required. Now, many of them infrastructural ones in terms of the age of buildings and things like that, that this has to be done because of that.
Okay. I read the October 2015 HIQA report, and in actual fact, what they did was they used the HIQA report as a tool to steer this through, to drive this through as quick as they could. In actual fact, there was the main criticism in the HIQA report of October 2015, which I read every page of it, is that there isn't enough staff there. In St Fidelis, which is the first section that they said has to be cleared out.
St Brendan's, St Fidelis have been identified as...
The 2 main problems there were staffing, and they wanted a screening between... My brother or my son lives in a bedroom with 3 others. They wanted screening between them. How difficult is that? Other than that, there was a little bit about having a room for people when they'd visit to go into and stuff like that. But overall, it was used...
The works have been deemed by the report as, in St Fidelis, non-economically viable to make the changes required by HIQA. Therefore,
people need to go back and read the HIQA report. Now, Jerry, if I could just go back to, with regard to the comment there, that 3 people have been moved out already and that they're doing so well in the community.
Briefly, no, we are running short of time. Okay. I understand what you're saying, and we will get to that down the line. But there's one central point here in terms of how this was communicated. In this report, it's outlined in a section called Family. The involvement of family has always been deemed important by St John of God's Kerry Services. However, it's now deemed central in terms of the planned transition of people living on the campus to be dispersed housing in the community. Due to the importance that's placed on communicating with families and residents, it was decided a subgroup be formed specifically to look at developing a strategy on communicating with families. The following areas were discussed. An annual report, DVD, which was an excellent communication tool, will continue to be produced with one of its core aims being to educate families about living successfully in the community, including the transition from campus to community. Family members participate as full members of the Development Committee. Family members to be kept abreast of all plans on an ongoing basis. A newsletter to be developed which will set out the overall vision and purpose of the development plan and transition. Education seminars will be developed in terms of tenancy agreements and support packages, etc. And in future, family engagement processes will take place to support families to take on a leadership role in supporting their family member. Did any of that happen?
Well, you know what I can say, Jerry? I said there's a bit of a mix-up there because that part of the report must belong to some other centre in some other part of the country, because none of that ever happened in Beaufort. Like, we were never contacted. No parent in there was contacted or brought in as a group and sat down and explained to them exactly what was going to happen. I have never been told anything about this. So the only thing I can conclude from that is that maybe they're getting the place mixed up with someplace else.
Never happened along those lines?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and that's one of the questions we've put to St John of God's. Look, Jack, what would you like to happen now?
What I would
you're
like
raising
to
your
happen
concerns,
now is
you're organising, you're lobbying.
Yeah.
What would you like to happen now?
Right now, we want this whole thing brought to a standstill. and we want our views about what should happen going forward. Taken on board. And I would regard to the people, 3 people have moved out already, and we have been told that they are doing very well and they're very happy.
Yeah. We are out of time on that. I'm sorry, Jack, because we are running late. I do want to get to one final important point with regards to it. The funding issue, which we haven't talked about. The fact is, and it's outlined in this report as well, that funding has been reducing for these services. You can call it a fallout from the economic crash. You can call it maybe the lack of commitment that's been there from governments past to putting services into some of our more vulnerable people.
Yes.
St John of God's, the HSE, are putting less money in. They have less money to operate with. They don't have the money to make the changes required by HICWA. This is the only way forward for them. What would you say to that?
How could it cost less money to run and operate St Mary of the Angels in Beaufort than it would cost to scatter people in different houses from one into the county theatre? It's going to cost millions more to do what they intend doing. Funding has nothing to do with it because it's going to cost millions more. Think of it yourself, if some of your people are in North Kerry, some are in South Kerry, some are in Mid Kerry, and you need all the services for them.
If it's explained to you though, if the numbers are provided, and this is why maybe the communication aspect of this is probably one of the biggest problems at the moment for you, that you weren't told, you weren't sat down, it wasn't explained clearly. If it was outlined, if figures were provided in terms of staffing, in terms of support, if there was a commitment maybe from the HSE to increase levels of staffing as part of this plan, and they gave you the figures for how much it will cost versus how much it will cost to keep the campus going and develop the campus as required under HICWA standards, would that satisfy you?
We look at it definitely, yes. But what I would say about moving my son out to St Mary of the Angels in Beaufort is that they would have to convince me that he would be kept in the lifestyle he's become accustomed to. And as far as I can see, the only way they could do that is to move him into Hotel Europe. That's the only way I think that he could have the same lifestyle.
You're that happy with the quality of what he's got?
That is the best way I could describe it to you. If he was to be kept in the same lifestyle, that's the only place I can think if they could move him into.
Okay.
Sure, if they want to do that, I'll talk to them.
Jack, you're going to continue on with your campaign?
I'm just getting started.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, thanks very much for outlining your concerns at this point and the issues with regards to your loved ones. And thanks as well to Joyce Bambury and Dolly Lawlor. And we've gotten a number of emails and contacts in the programme by several other parents, all telling the same story that you have just heard from our 3 contributors at the start of the programme. We have invited St John of God's services to come on the programme to outline their position. We've also invited the HSE to answer some questions, and hopefully we'll be hearing from them maybe on tomorrow's programme or within the next day to outline and to give explanations as to what happened and the way it has happened and what the plans are now, and also what the plans are for the property at St Mary's of the Angels into the future, and the future of St Francis's School, if that is to be affected. Because in this report it says the Board of Management are to be identified or to be informed and to develop a plan for move off campus. Now we understand that isn't happening, but we're still waiting for clarification.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Radio Kerry. For more, go to radiokerry.ie/podcasts or search iTunes using the keyword Radio Kerry.